The brothers Wisp. The brothers Wisp, brothers Wisp. The brothers Wisp. The brothers.
You're now listening to Greg. It's the brothers Wisp. Let's take a
Hey guys, this is Mike from the Brothers Wisp. This is Brothers Wisp number 72, and we've got Dave Atias. Is that how you pronounce it?
Said it perfect.
All right. From Los Angeles. And he's the only other guy we have on, so there's no point in everybody saying who they are because there's me and him. Anyway, rambling.
Plug the sponsor. Come on, plug the sponsors.
So Greg is still MIA, but so I assume Sonar is still a sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Sonar. For those of you that don't know Sonar, they're what I would say is probably the most current of the billing platforms. They've got APIs that do all kinds of things, all kinds of integrations with other services. Everything's web-based, cloud-based. I'm a recent convert of theirs, and so far it's working pretty good.
Say it like you got paid to say it. Like, brought to you by Sonar, a scalable, intuitive, and comprehensive ISP billing and operational support system. Learn more at sonar.software.
There
There you go.
you go. Anyway, so go check them out, and if not, get a billing system. So many of you don't have billing systems, get one.
I'm not a whoops, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no. What were you saying?
I'm not a Wisp, but I know someone that uses it and really, absolutely, totally loves it. His name is Nick Arellano. He's out there in Chicago, runs a Wisp and a DOCSIS network, and he uses Sonar. And he's also big into integrations and API. Maybe we can have him on the show and talk about what he does with it.
Sweet.
And he's also a diehard MikroTik user, though he's not closed to other suggestions. He just found that it works best in his scenario. So yeah, I'd like to get him on the show at some point. But
Sure.
let's dig into the meat and potatoes here.
Sure. Yeah. I put this on the top of the list because Greg and I talked about it several months ago, and then we never did anything. As I started to kind of put some videos together. And I started watching, more YouTube videos. I started noticing that, YouTube now you can put, those little cards on the end, and it's links you can click on to go to different videos or watch, go to your channel or go to a certain playlist or go to your website, stuff like that. And I figured out how to do that on YouTube, but the problem is that it just overlays whatever you have in your video. So all our videos, we can't add them because it's the podcast, and then it stops.
Dude, but on YouTube, nobody wants to look at our stupid faces. Even if it covered it, it wouldn't affect anyone.
I don't know how many actually watch, but I know that when we compare the MP3 downloads off the server for the different podcast services, compared to the YouTube views, YouTube views are 6, 7, 8 times in number. Now they could just be hitting play and minimizing the window. I've done that several times for things that I've watched. Yeah,
tell me about this Quad 101 thing. That looks pretty awesome.
Oh yeah. So this Quad 101, it's basically another one of those DNS resolver projects. It seems as though that every few months somebody new has to have one. Cloudflare was the last one. Quad 9 was the one before. Was the one before that. And so now we have Quad 101. It's 101.101, so on, and it's ran by the is it Taiwan? I think it was.
Yeah, it's got some, I don't know, Asian writing up on the top left, so I couldn't tell you. Let's click on it and see what that does.
Yeah, it's the.
Oh shit! Now I can't read anything.
It's the it's the Taiwan Network Information Center. They, I forget what it was that was so secure, private about them. I saw it in the not really press release, but the announcement of it. It's basically these guys and Quad 9 are the only ones that have this level of DNS security and privacy and things.
Now, explain that to me, because I mean, I think we all understand what DNS is. We don't have to go into that. But you said that Cloud9 and Cloudflare, what was it? Also did that?
Quad 9.
Quad 9.
Which is done by Packet Clearinghouse and IBM and a bunch of other places put together.
But what are they trying to accomplish? What is the point of this whole project?
So some of them, well, actually, so for like Quad 9, they actually have multiple servers that do different types of services. One of them that they're doing is different levels of DNS security, so that there's as much security from the root servers to the authoritative servers, down to the individual client, so that way that someone didn't tamper with your DNS request along the way. Who's responding is
got it. So
all
kind
the way
of
through.
like, sort of like, I mean, I hate to use this term in this scenario because it's usually used in VPNs, but man in the middle where they can intercept and kind of change.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So,
Yeah,
and why would that, and this would be done by what, companies that want to phish or something like that? Redirect you to a fake bank site and get all your passwords?
Yeah, so, there are different, illegal things someone could do, outright stealing information from you, by some sort of redirect. I think some of the a few months ago, there was a whole chain of, I think there was BGP hijacking to spoof DNS or of Google's DNS servers, so that then people who were using Google DNS would then get redirected to somebody else's website hosting for one of the cryptocurrency exchanges.
Understood.
And so these guys actually on this BGP hijack, which allowed them to then do a DNS hijack. Which they couldn't have done the DNS hijack if it was secure DNS, because they wouldn't have those private keys. But they ended up stealing like millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency, because people were logging into fake websites, putting in their information, and so then these guys just logged into those places and stole all their stuff.
I'm just a little bit curious. I mean, how do they even do that? Don't you have to be intercepting the traffic at some point along the hops?
Yeah, and so BGP, so most of the internet just assumes that everybody else is going to play nice. DNS, BGP, all these things, it just assumes that you're going to do what you're supposed to do. Very little security. And so there's BGP hijacking happens a lot, where somebody else will just start announcing somebody else's
Network.
subnets. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, usually it is, somebody will be announcing a /20, and then, criminal A comes along and announces individual /24s out of that space. So then, because the /24 takes precedence.
All the traffic gets routed to his or wherever he wants it to go. I get that. But for the purpose of Quad 101 and the DNS stuff, I mean, BGP, I understand. You could say that your autonomous system number is this or that and start screwing, even though the ISPs or the backbone carriers are supposed to protect against that. I'm sure some gets through. But for the purpose of DNS, how would a let's call them criminal, hijack DNS? I mean, do they have to access the DNS server itself and change records?
And so what they could do is obviously they need a DNS server that's set up to return whatever information they want. So they'll set up a DNS server as, being authoritative for, or like, it's on, 8.8.8.8, and then they'll make it authoritative for whatever, DNS,
so another
of the domain names that they're trying to steal. And so then by doing the BGP hijack, they're getting the 8.8.8 requests, and then their server, then their DNS server returns whatever requests they want.
Got it. So it's a two-step process. First, you got to hijack BGP announcements or what networks or subnets that they're announcing, and then you also have to have DNS servers set up in your fake network, which is what people are thinking is the real network. I got it. Okay.
And so then, if it was, secure DNS all the way through, it wouldn't, they wouldn't have the private keys or whatever. I'm not sure how it actually works because I haven't set it up, but it wouldn't be a part of that, trust system, and so clients would not accept those answers because, they weren't signed correctly. And so that's all the security stuff. And then, privacy, I'm not sure what they do for privacy-wise other than just not, like, tracking people, what they look up.
Yeah, you mean Quad 101 because they are on their website, like, the only thing that grabs your eye is privacy, the thing we care about most, and then install. Like, we don't know what it does. We don't know what it's for, but we care about privacy. Hey, install this. I get what you're saying, and it sounds like an excellent idea, but DNS is typically UDP. How are you going to have high security on a UDP connection?
So I don't know the details of like DNSSEC and whatnot, but like I think like what a lot of these guys are saying is that like they aren't they aren't doing anything bad to you, whereas say Comcast could be trying to track all your DNS lookups and then extrapolate information and sell it to an advertiser or, somebody else like that. Trying to build profiles based upon your DNS lookups.
They would see a lot of porn sites coming from my computer. I don't know what they would try to sell me. Maybe some Valtrex or who knows. Maybe hand cream. But yeah.
And so, I see where they're coming from, but end user ISPs, they have to be sure to not get caught in all that glamour of using Google DNS, using Cloudflare DNS, so on, because it
those are big targets.
Yeah, that and there are some don't need this, but some CDNs out there require that the resolving DNS server, like that's where they test the performance to. So if your ISP has a crap connection, it goes through, maybe your ISP is buying from another ISP that has some direct peering with Netflix, or they have some Netflix cache boxes or whatever. But say this, Taiwan, Quad 101, they probably don't have a direct Netflix box. So, because why would they? They're they're not an end user ISP. So then Netflix, I'm using Netflix as an example, not saying Netflix is a content company that does this. It's an easy example. So then, they would look up performance to that DNS server, choose what node to serve you from, and now you're getting served from a crappy node. You may have packet loss or jitter, and your content isn't coming from the boxes right there because you used a DNS server somewhere else.
Okay. That's a very good point. I never even thought of that, but you run an ISP, so these things are stuff that you have knowledge of.
Yeah. And so, I mean, not all CDNs require that. Some require more, like, if you have a cache box, both the request and the DNS server have to be visible to the cache box. So if you're using, so if you have a Google Cache box and you're using, Quad 9 or Quad 101 DNS, your cache box is going to be neutered because it's not seeing that other DNS as being on your network. I'm not saying Google it, but there are companies that do that. But for other people that don't care about that, maybe privacy is higher on your concern list than your CDN performance. And so there's another person that you can go to now. Google does it. Cloudflare, Quad 9, now Quad 101. Level 3's DNS servers are pretty well known. Those I forget who it was. This other company that Cisco bought. They did like the DNS like filtering and stuff. Lots of people use them for DNS. Anyway.
OpenDNS maybe? No.
Oh yeah. OpenDNS. Anyway, so
they've been around forever.
But so they're out there now. Somebody else.
Very interesting. So who would want to use a service like this as a client, like a guy like me or anybody that just does just random browsing? I'm not an ISP. I'm not a WISP. Why would I want to use this? Just so I could avoid being having my stuff tracked? For those that are really concerned about their privacy and stuff like that, this would be a service that you would want to use. But you wouldn't just use this if you were concerned about privacy. I mean, there's so many different facets to privacy.
Oh yeah. Like it's just one layer, but it's it's just now there's two different services that have that level of privacy, so you have some redundancy. Should your preferred privacy focused DNS server fail, there's another one.
But that was a really, really good point about the cache box. Up until just now, I had no idea you can or ISPs cache Netflix stuff. I mean, or are you just using that as an example? But the point is anything that's cached content-wise, if you're using an outside DNS server, not of the ISPs, you are skipping the cache box. So you might have... Yeah, potentially, exactly. There's no way to know. Well, is there a way to know, actually?
So the different content companies will tell you how to optimize for their service, and so they'll tell you up front, you need to have your DNS like this, or you don't.
Yeah,
there are some extensions to DNS that pass through the IP address of the initial requester, so that then that's not an issue. But then now it's a privacy issue because now they don't know just that it's Bob's ISP making the request. They know it's the IP address of the person doing the request. So now you're falling back into privacy stuff.
But tell me about your ISP. You run an ISP, and for several other ISPs, do you know if any of the other ones or yourself, do you have any caching boxes that kind of rely on using your DNS?
My ISP does not, because I'm not big enough. And I'm fortunate enough that one of my upstream's peers on the Equinix Internet Exchange in Chicago. So I'm gonna get service from there most of the time. Mm-hmm. One of the other ISPs I work for, again, same thing. They have, their upstream is on the IX, so it's very unlikely that it would go somewhere else. But both ISPs, I do have, unbound DNS server running on Debian, on the network to absolve any chances of those issues happening.
Understood. Cool. Very cool. And I think we just started touching on security. Well, in this case, specific with DNS, but I think that that might bring us over to the next topic. Let's reorder that, and we'll segue straight into VoIP security, and then we'll go into the rest of the things. So Let's just give a brief overview of VoIP security. And, I'm the VoIP guy, but, before I even get into it, I just want to say that security is never a single facet. But just like we said before, it's going to be a number of techniques and a number of different softwares and different ways to do it. You do want to adhere to a few different basic rules where you want to protect at different layers and you want to protect at different levels. So for example, in the VoIP world, just like actually any other service provider or hosting company or whatever you might want to call it, you want to protect at your point of entry, and you also want to protect at your server. So you're protecting in two spots already. And then and this is a part that I'm really going to hope that the users can give me some feedback on, I've been trying to find a way to protect at layer 7. And I'll talk about that later because that was an interesting thing. It never even occurred to me that I would need to, but let's get started. So let's talk about at the firewall level. Like, first of all, we want to protect against, I am a huge target. My company, my server farms, huge target for hacking in, trying to make international calls, trying to do robocalls. So about every second, I drop about, last time I checked, which was about a year ago, it was about 10,000 malicious packets per second. So there's a lot of stuff right there. And the way I use my firewall, the MikroTik, to protect against that is the first thing, the most simplest thing is I block everything international. I have a handful of customers that are overseas, like Bulgaria, Israel, England, South America. And so the first thing I do is I block APNIC, I block RIPE, I block AFRINIC, I block all continents and everything that's not USA. And I whitelist any of my customers that are overseas. That does have some issues, like some mobile users. We have to do some tricky, amazing things with them. But I do that because that's the simplest form of blocking most of the crap that comes to attack. So do you have any, before we go into like server protection, do you have any input on, I'm sorry. And I also I do some very basic DDoS stuff. Basic, better than nothing. DDoS you can configure it a plethora of different ways and the different techniques. I like to protect even for the local stuff, like, I'm sorry, not local, but the national stuff. National traffic is TFTP traffic, because that's what I use to auto provision all the phones. We're slowly switching and migrating over to HTTPS provisioning. But again, that because of all the customers, migration happens not as fast as I would like, but is in progress. So what I did with TFTP was, if I see more than, and I configured this in the MikroTik, if the MikroTik sees more than 80 concurrent TFTP connections at any given moment, it puts that IP, the source IP, into a blacklist. And then the blacklist, obviously, all packets from those source IPs are dropped. So that's pretty much all I just want to talk about now with firewall protection. Obviously, it's layer 3 protection. I'm not running BGP, so I don't have to worry about that. But Mike, what do you have to say about firewall protection?
Sure. Yeah. So the bulk of what I've run so far has been FreePBX, which has had fail-to-ban built in for a long time.
But that's already server protection. Tell me about the firewall stuff.
So traditionally, that's all I've had is I just use fail-to-ban, doing that P tables on the server.
Yeah.
Knowing I needed something more sophisticated, but always at those, weighing the, if I get too aggressive at the, network layer, in front of the server, causing, causing other issues. And actually, at one of my clients that I've been working with, their hosted voice services, they did do everything through not everything, most of it through a Viata firewall, and it was so locked down
that no one can register.
I mean, like, so it was almost all work, hosted stuff with work from home people. So then, anytime somebody moved, you had to, go whitelist a new IP in the firewall and figure out what IP address they were using to take it out of the whitelist. And it was only for certain ports. So then they could register, but then they couldn't access like the web interface to go to their call history or any of the other web-based things. And I've been trying to liberate that firewall a little bit because it's I think it's going too far.
Well, it depends how granular you want to get. I mean, I also do other things like how many concurrent SIP connections at any given moment. I do that as well. But for the purpose of like firewall protection, is there anything else you're doing in the firewall? Because we're going to get to like fail to ban.
Oh, sure.
Talk about servers.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No. And so that's all I've really done so far. I'm probably looking to move more of it towards the server level, versus dedicated firewall. But implementing some more of these, more like what you're saying, just gross, how many TFTP connections, how many SIP connections, per IP.
Yeah.
Because work from home user is not going to have more than 2 SIP connections.
Well, I don't do any home users. It's mostly actually only businesses. But yeah, it can get pretty tricky. I meant so like the business, the business is the customer, but then they have people that work from home. So then they have 30 employees, but they'll just have a Polycom sitting on their home office. Yeah.
And so they'll register from Comcast and Charter and Cox and whoever else.
That's why I allow everything US based. The overseas people, we just have VPNs and dynamic DNS. And MikroTik actually finally came out with probably a year ago. You can add an address list entry using an FQDN, which was really nice. But yeah, and I just also want to point out with VoIP, and this is, from my knowledge, is specific to VoIP, that all UDP ports need to be open. Anything above 1024, I'm sorry. 1024 all the way up to 65535 has to be open because your RTP ports, which is your audio stream, which is different from the registration port of 5060 or 5061, depending on if you're encrypted or not, those have to be open. So VoIP has a very specific challenge where we have to leave a lot open, but still lock it down somehow. So now, with that said, I think the next thing to talk about is, we do a little DDoS on the firewall. We do blocking of, international subnets and, stuff like that. Obviously, maximum amount of connections for, let's say, TFTP or SIP, that's kind of involved with the DDoS protection. We should probably get Tom Smith on a show because I know he's big on DDoS, and that could be a whole show in its own. But
have this figure out by what Tom's schedule is these days. Well, he's not talking to us.
What? Oh man, we'll talk to you about that later.
No, he is. He's just not on the shows anymore. He's just busy. Plus being plus being 6 hours different from me. Getting coordinated, free time.
Yeah, just buy him a pint. He'll be happy. But now let's talk about server stuff.
Sure.
So as you said, you want to also protect at the server level, and that can take a few different paths. Obviously, fail to ban I've seen be extremely effective because it's actually going to read your log files on the server. And just FYI, for people that don't know fail to ban, you should know fail to ban if you have a server that's on the public internet, or open to the internet, let's say it that way, because it won't only protect SIP connections, but it protects pretty much for any service like web, like email. I don't know who's hosting an email server, but any server that you're hosting, it's got some definitions in there in a text file where you can say, turn this protection on. And all of a sudden it'll start reading your log files, which of course you have to say where the log file is. It typically has a default idea of where they are. and it looks for certain keywords in the log file. And if it, for example, for SIP, if it says wrong password, it's going to grab the IP address out of that line that says wrong password, and it's going to put it into a block list on the server. So that's also kind of nice. But I have seen and fail to ban is great for that sort of thing. But I've seen recently too people trying to log into the VoIP servers that I have, and what they've done is they've kind of adapted how they attack. So if I can give you a quick analogy, because I'm a huge Star Trek fan, only TNG, by the way.
We agree.
when the Borg when the Borg attacks the Enterprise puts up its shields and has to constantly change the shield harmonics, because the Borg is going to adapt and figure out how to get through that shield. So the same thing I've seen happening with VoIP attacks. They're not attacking like brute force, like 5,000 requests a second, because that's obviously a red flag. Even 20 requests a second, obviously a red flag. So what they're doing now is they're doing one request every, I'd say, anywhere between 30 and about 60 seconds. And they'll just do it over and over and over. So those are a little bit more difficult to block, because the last thing I want to happen is say block two wrong passwords in 1 minute. And let's say I have a customer that reboots their phone twice that for whatever reason has a wrong password. Some of my customers have access to the portal that want to have access, and they'll click change password on the extension. The extension will boot up. It'll try to log in with the old password or secret, which of course is going to be one knock against it. And then if it reboots again, like this thing isn't working, let me reboot it again. Bang, that's knock number 2. And now the entire office, everybody behind that IP is now blocked. Don't want that happening. So, I mean, have you seen things like that happen?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I actually have it implemented to some degree on my own network. I need to kind of rebuild it because it's a pretty old implementation, and I've learned a lot since then. But most of this is based off of server logs. Syslog on Linux can be extremely powerful in sending logs multiple places. And so what you can do is you can send everything to a central syslog server that runs fail to ban, so it sees all attempts on all servers.
Okay.
So then, because they're probably not just trying one of your boxes on your network, they're probably trying 5 or 10.
Oh, they're gonna find anything that's open and try.
Oh, sure, yeah, but at that, one try every 30 seconds or one try a minute, times that by however many boxes that you have. Now that's a good amount of attempts. And so then fail to ban is so flexible, you can specify any command line to run. So you can run something that then can inject an IP into your MikroTik firewall or into your MikroTik black hole routing to affect your whole network. So once your central syslog server sees this one IP attempt 10 logins in a minute to your network in general, bam, done.
That's really nice. So in other words, the server is gonna, let's say, intercept this malicious source IP address, and then it's gonna send out a command to log into the MikroTik to add that IP address to whatever list or blacklist you have, and bang, they're pretty much stopped at the firewall, taking kind of the load off of the servers. That's nice, but that's actually really awesome. But do we have and here's why I found I need to figure this one out. Recently, I found that. And it's only happened once, but it kind of opened my eyes because, okay, so again, VoIP traffic, whether it be SIP or RTP, is going to be UDP. Unless you specifically want the requests the SIP registrations to be in TCP, but default it's going to be in UDP. And it's very easy to spoof UDP IPs because it's only one way. So I actually found that the server was reporting a wrong login for a particular IP address. I looked up that IP address, and it was in it was part of a block list on my MikroTik. So my firewall was already blocking that IP. So the only way that IP could have been hitting the server is if it was at layer 7. So it came in as layer 3, as let's say a US IP address, but in the layer 7 messages, like the SIP and SDP messages, says that, oh, this is my IP, and that's actually a very simple kind of spoof to do because, well, let's say NAT changes your layer 7 stuff. If you're doing what's it called, SIP ALG, you can very easily change it. So even a novice can change it. But that brings up the question of how do you protect layer 7 attacks? And I don't have an answer for that. I have my server providers, Bicom, they have a product that says does it, but they don't really give me any information at all as to how it does it. And they charge an annual fee. So
always trust your vendor. They know what's best for you.
Really? I was just going to say, do you really? Okay.
I don't think I trust any of my vendors, no matter how much I'm.
Look, I have no problem. It's not a question of trust in my case. It's more of a question of what is it actually doing? Because if it's doing the same thing that Fail2Ban does, but a little bit differently, then I don't need it. It's wasted money. And they're charging $800 a year just for one server. So I need to know exactly what it's doing. If it's doing layer 7 protection where Asterisk itself is actually reporting to this system, or this system is reading Asterisk core messages, that'd be great. But I don't know. So if any of our listeners or viewers or whatever have any recommendations, even if it's something simple, or that would be really helpful because I haven't found anything that useful.
Sure, yeah. On a kind of a tangent to that a little bit, FreePBX a couple versions ago came out with their own sort of firewall, and I think it's just scripts and things that just add things like tables. I don't think they actually built their own firewall, but it's supposed to intelligently determine what are good IPs and what are bad. And I think it, when it has a connection, a successful registration, it whitelists it, but not necessarily like I think it's it needs to be like the first registration attempt from that IP has to succeed.
Yeah.
And then it whitelists the IP. So then
okay, that's smart.
You're slightly more aggressive in your blacklist if you've already whitelisted something that is good. So then in those offices, once one person registers the first person registers successfully, that office is now whitelisted. And so then anybody else that screws up in that office won't be blacklisted because, the first, the very first attempt was good. So now it allows all of them.
Understood. That's kind of a nice trick.
And if that's not how that works, then I just thought of a new way of doing it.
No, that is actually a really nice trick. I'm curious to know. Well, first of all, obviously I whitelist all of my business customers. Most of them have static IPs. But that is nice because, again, like you said, if somebody's going to register successfully, that is part of a whitelist. I'm wondering, can Fail2Ban actually read log files? I guess it can. Could you customize Fail2Ban to allow whitelists?
Yeah, because Fail2Ban, it's very simplistic. You give it basically a regex of what you want it of the bad thing, and then you give it a command that you want it to do.
So you give it the IP tables command to block it.
Sure, yeah. So what you could do is you could make another, define another service and just point it at the same file and say, when it registers successfully, it doesn't have to know it's successful. You just give it the regex for a successful registration.
That's right. Yeah.
And then instead of adding it, on the action, you give it a whitelist action versus a blacklist action.
Ah, pretty clever. Pretty clever, Mike. I'm impressed.
And I don't know if it would be intelligent enough to be able to determine the first request from an IP. Because because if somebody hijacks credentials, somehow, after or eventually gets in, now they're whitelisted versus an office, only listen to the very first attempt. That would be more complicated.
Yeah, you would definitely have to be doing some coding, scripting,
and that's beyond me to know what to do there. But but
and
I mean,
how do you know what the first one is? Is it just new IP address? We've never seen this before. Successful. Put it in the whitelist.
Yet, and maybe that's something. Maybe that's something you could do with like a MikroTik and sufficient scripting. Is you just look for all SIP registrations at layer 7, which
can't
but and so then you put them into address lists. Say I have seen this one, or I have not seen this.
Honestly, I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea to put in the MikroTik. MikroTik is only going to look at layer 3 stuff. The layer 7 shit is layer 7. That's like the for the purposes of SIP or I'm sorry, VoIP is going to be SIP and SDP. But the log that tells you, the place that tells you if it's a wrong password is going to be on the server. So you wouldn't be able to do that on MikroTik.
But you would be able to see the SIP response telling you
unfortunately
404 or whatever it is that goes back.
In a registration, you always get an unauthorized the first time you make a call.
Sure.
It just does it that way to make sure that it's not a spoofed address.
All right. Yeah. And so, perhaps building off of some of the logic of like the MikroTik brute force SSH script on the wiki, where it's like it needs to attempt this many times.
Yeah, I see. I actually use that.
So perhaps somebody could take that. I'm not saying I'm the guy to know how to make this happen.
Yeah.
But like adding it to subsequent lists, be like, okay, this IP address made a request. It was denied once, as it should be. Now a second deny. Okay, something's wrong if they have a second deny within 2 seconds.
You wouldn't be able to do that. With the SSH script, it's just looking for how many times a connection is established, not looking at any of the responses. Just request 1, request 2, and 3 are blocklisted.
Yeah, you just gotta be a little smarter at layer 7. I'm not the guy to do it. I'm sure somebody could.
Yeah, if I was a coder, I mean, that's definitely something I'd be working on. I just because I think what you said,
because most of SIP is still plain text unless you purposely use a TLS based thing, right?
Well, TLS is obviously going to be the best, but let me just tell you there's a lot of ways around. So TLS is going to be for the request, for the registration, and for the RTP, right? If you're actually encrypting RTP, which is the voice. But what's interesting, and get this, I caught this once early on in my VoIP career, is that the way you do auto provisioning from a phone is based on MAC address. Mm-hmm. Now, there's only so many MAC addresses out there. So if let's take, for example, Cisco and Polycom, two of the most widely used, back then, widest used phones out there ever, okay? So the prefix of the MAC address is going to be the vendor. So now how many combinations do you have to do with the suffix? And once you send that request to a TFTP server saying, hi, this is my MAC address. Can I please have my config, which contains your extension, which contains your passwords? Once they have that, you're in. So that's an incredibly easy way. Even if you're TLS, even if you're encrypted the whole nine, you could still get that config file. So that's why actually we're still migrating over to encrypted auto provisioning.
I've had that problem myself. And where I'm like, I changed their password. How has it been hijacked already? Like it's hijacked the next day.
Yeah, because they have your MAC address.
Yeah, and so they learn the MAC address that's good on that server. So once it gets blocked, they just re-request the config file from the server.
They're in,
and away they go.
Yeah.
And like I've up until like a week ago, I was always like, why would I use anything other than TFTP? It works great. Why would I do all this other stuff?
Right.
And then now I'm like,
that's you learned. So a lot of vendors now support HTTPS auto provisioning, which is obviously how for the past 3 years I've been setting up all my customers. But I still have a handful that are still on TFTP, so I can't totally close the port yet. But we're still pushing them to change, and obviously we have access to their firewall, so we're going to be changing that shortly. But we first have to upgrade the firmware on the phones. But yeah, I mean, now I guess you understand what I understood is don't use TFTP. It's not a good idea.
Only because I'd never seen it before. It never occurred to me that somebody would do that until like I'm looking at the log file and I see, hundreds of attempts of trying to grab files, and like actually the first ones were like, it was requesting like file names that like wouldn't even be valid.
000 something.
It's a like on a Polycom's all system, it was requesting like a Cisco URL, and I'm like, why would that? No, that's a Cisco file name. Why would that? Oh,
yeah. Then it clicked. It clicked. So yeah, that's. I just want to emphasize again, and that's why security is never a straightforward thing. It's always a conglomerate, a bunch of different techniques that you have to implement or figure out how to implement to make things work. But the key to that is first understanding exactly how your systems work. And in your case, something that I never even thought about because I don't do BGP. You do BGP is the BGP hijacking thing, which I'm sure with BGP guys is a very common thing they have to think about. But security comes in so many different forms and techniques and ways to do it. So if anybody has any ideas or anything cool they've seen or software they've seen that can do any type of security, please post it. I'd love to read it. I'd love to see what it does. I'd love to say thank you to those people posting. So that'd be nice. But I think if we're done here, I think our next thing is moving on to what you wrote is UniFi lack of real-time information. And is that still the case?
Yeah, and so actually, like that was my initial gripe, because I've been, because I hadn't used the UniFi security gateway until somewhat recently. So my UniFi dashboard was always lacking because I just have the access points. Mm-hmm. And so I'm used to MikroTik routers where it's like you can get everything in real time. Torch or mm-hmm. interface. Metrics or firewall metrics, everything's in real time.
Yeah.
And then it irritated me that Ubiquiti didn't have that. And so, I found a feature request asking for it and, joined in. And so now I get emailed whenever someone else joins in. But then I realized that it's not just like, I started this complaining about Ubiquiti, but that's almost every platform, Cisco and Juniper and all like the big boy routers, like they don't have a way to see real-time information.
Naturally, because I think it's because when you're a router, all right, you want all that horsepower, all that processing. You want to dedicate as much of that as you can to actually processing and passing packets and routing packets. I mean, MikroTik is huge on how to use how to configure your MikroTik so that it uses less CPU usage. I mean, they came out with features specifically just for that, like the raw filter. That was there specifically to I guess, scrutinize, or it's a firewall before packets even get to the connection tracker. So, and the way you order your firewall rules. So, I mean, these enterprise routers, they're meant to pass traffic. And I think this kind of is going to start touching into the Cisco CCDA kind of world, where it's the design world. You don't want all of your, monitoring, tracking crap on your core routers. You want that at your edge and at the, whatever the middle layer was called. I don't remember. Distribution layer. But, one thing I've found and I've done, and I'll give credit where credit is due. Before that, I've always monitored all of my customers' MikroTiks. All right. And I was using Zabbix, which did a good job. I mean, there's, I think, one other that does a better job that's free. But, where credit is due is Nick Arellano. I asked him, hey, could you set up a NetXMS server for me, which is obviously SNMP. So let's say it's real time. There's a slight lag of like a millisecond. But it is, let's call it real time. So it'll gather all SNMP statistics from all of my routers. And NetXMS is great for doing that, but they don't have any graphs or any pretty graphs. So he has this other app. It's free if you install it, or you can subscribe to it and pay for it if you have them host it. It's called Grafana. And Grafana, it just takes your data, whatever it is, and they have a million different plugins for a million different platforms. And it'll just graph any data that you give it. It'll graph, and you can obviously design the graphs to how you want it. But that's what I've done with MikroTik.
I don't remember which one, but I believe one of the brothers had his company sponsor or pay for that feature enhancement in NetXMS to add the Grafana integration.
Oh, I didn't know you had to pay for it.
Well, no, but when they developed it, initially, when they built the initial Grafana support for NetXMS, it didn't exist before, and then hey, can you make this? And
so they spearheaded it. So one of the brothers did that.
That I believe across a few of the brothers, there's been several. The bigger feature requests have been things that their work said. We like this platform enough. It's missing this one thing. Let's just give them a couple $1,000 and get this feature we want. Now versus whenever it happens.
Oh, you know what? I bet you Tom Kernack would know. If he's not the actual person that did it, because he's huge on NetXMS. Yeah. Huge. Just Google his name. You'll see his face everywhere. But tell me about Unify, lack of real-time information. Is that still the case? Because I think I heard something. Now, I'm not a Unify guy. I'm strictly MikroTik for routing. But are you talking about Unify as a router? Let's see.
Yeah, and so there's so much statistics within Unify about what clients are downloading, and over the past day they've downloaded this much YouTube versus this much Facebook versus whatever.
But it's not real time.
Yeah, but you don't know what's happening now. So if there's a problem now, you don't know who's doing it and what they're doing. It's just you can tell 5 minutes ago what was happening, or an average over some amount of time. Not.
So are you talking about? No. Are you talking about layer 7 real time stuff, or just anything like layer 3? Okay. Because I wouldn't know about that, but I know a decent amount about FortiGate. It's a router, a layer. It's a UTM that's made by Fortinet. And if you ever ask me what is my second most favorite router, I'll tell you Fortinet, because they really do a fantastic job at layer 7 stuff. But they were, last I checked, last I saw their interface, it was not real time. But they did have, to make it real time, was an extra feature, which you had to buy because they're a public company, is called Fortim Manager, and that is their interface, their web GUI that connects to your FortiGate and gets you real-time statistics. So I guess they could do it, but I'm wondering if Unify is going to do something similar because, again, Unify is a publicly traded company, and they have to keep selling. Sometimes they come out with stuff that's completely out of left field, solar. And so, I mean, I think that would be a good thing for them to do is somehow integrate real time through their GUI and charge a fee of some sorts.
Sure, yeah. And, understand that, on a lot of platforms, especially like the, on the big routers, that they're not going to want that on all the time because of the resource consumption. Yeah. But, it's not even like a toggleable option, turn this on while I figure it out, and this, define some limitation scope, this interface, for most platforms, it's not even an option to do.
But that sounds more like an end user kind of thing that you might want. For enterprise people, they don't want to see that shit. They just want to pass packets as fast as possible, keep their CPU down. So I think mostly for end users or for businesses that have a company that manages their firewall, they want to see how many times you've gone to YouTube or something.
I'm thinking useful in troubleshooting situations. Something's wrong. What's happening? And I know there's flow tools and things that some people use, but sometimes that's not. I mean, I go back to Winbox. It's it's always what's happening right now on this specific set of things. In Torch or whatever, and it's it doesn't have to be the same, but just so many companies are just so far it's not even a half-ass attempt. It's just no attempt.
I mean, I guess, but you'd have to think from a company's point of view, how many people are advanced to actually know what they're looking at? For example, if I have a customer that says, oh, this website isn't loading fast, I'll do some very basic tests, from the MikroTik, obviously layer 3 tests. I'll check their layer 2 connection in their office. And the last thing I'll do is that's it. Start capturing packets, have them send a request to the website. Here, open your web page, put in the website, and I'll tell you when to press enter. I start capturing packets, press enter, and I wait to see how long it is until, and then I capture a certain amount of packets. Obviously, when the site loads or starts to load is when I'll stop capturing. I'll take that PCAP, download it, open it in Wireshark, and start analyzing there. Now, I don't think any firewall company is ever going to come out with that because how many people out there actually know to do that or what that is,
Yeah, that's my default. Something doesn't work, fire up packet capture.
Yep, that's it, and see what the layer 7. See what's happening in the time responses. But that is something you'd only do in Wireshark. I don't know if you'd want your firewall doing it. I guess it'd be a nice feature if you ever wanted to test website response time. That could be nice. But I don't know. I guess if you want to post in the Slack feed, what kind of features or what exactly would you like in real time on a Ubiquiti or a Unify device, that'd kind of be cool. Because, layer 3 stuff, yeah, Ubiquiti should be able to show you all layer 3 stuff real time. But again, Ubiquiti, they're publicly traded. They're looking to sell to the masses, to everybody and anyone, whether you're a home user, an enthusiast, or a network engineer. They want to sell to everyone, so they want to make it easy with those pretty buttons and one-click configurations. So I guess, maybe if they came out with some a feature pack or some license key that you can unlock, that could allow that, that'd be kind of cool. But I think you'd have to specify what features you're looking for.
Sure, yeah, and it's, just, yeah, I can do that.
Cool, yeah. And let some of the users say what they'd like.
Sure.
I'd like to see what people are requesting. Aside from bandwidth usage and shit like that, the basics, the basic SNMP stuff, what else would you like to see in a GUI real time or close to real time? Because I'm sure it'll take some processing time or response time to capture all the information. But yeah, that'd be nice to see. And I'd still probably not want to use Ubiquiti anyway. I mean, they're cloud key. I don't know what the hell they were thinking with that. I get it, but whatever. I've had so many go bad. But let's see. Now, moving on to the next one. This one looks interesting. What are you talking about with this? Network capability in virtualization platforms. Talk about that.
It was something that I had seen Tom complaining about some time ago, and I had never, it had never crossed my plate as something I would need to do until like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and then it was like, oh my God, this isn't here. Like, this sucks. So like in VMware, the virtual switches that they have
okay.
aren't switches. Like, you turn on, like, it's just so very basic. There's no Mac learning. There's no if you turn on promiscuous mode, so you can do and so like VMware also limits it to like one MAC address per interface defined in the configuration file.
Okay.
Like, it's so difficult on like a layer 2 net. Like, I always just ran servers.
Mm-hmm.
Virtual servers to my host, to a switch, to a router, done. But when you start running virtual infrastructure,
yeah,
you start running CHRs, and you've got tunnels to other parts of your network. Now you've got MAC addresses coming. Now
all
this
over
is
the
a
place.
problem.
Yeah.
So there's and like Proxmox and some others.
Yeah.
It's not an issue. They operate how you would expect a switch to operate.
What was the name of their switch? I'm actually looking that up now. They had a virtual switch that there was a name for. What is it called?
For VMware?
For Proxmox.
Oh, for Proxmox. I don't remember.
I'm gonna log into my Proxmox box right now and set up a new virtual switch because I can't remember what it was called. But they had a switch system that was able to do all that fancy stuff, not just like stupid VLAN tagging, which they could all do. But like you said, once you start doing layer 2 tunnels, bang, you're gonna have a whole lot of MAC addresses in there. So.
Yeah, so Tom actually left VMware to Proxmox because of this problem.
Tom Smith.
Yeah. When you turn on the promiscuous mode, which basically turns it into a hub.
Yeah.
Now all of your VMs get copies of all of the packets that happen. Which
like
is less than desirable.
I think it's OVS. What is OVS? OVS, I think that's Open Virtual Switch. What is that? Let's see. VS Switch. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
VMware Labs actually came out with a plugin that doesn't even require a reboot that adds some basic Mac learning functionality to allow you to turn on the promiscuous mode so you have multiple MAC addresses per, VM interface, but without having such high, server load from duplicating all of the packets everywhere. And it's been through several refinements, and actually there's some of that functionality included in vSphere 6.7, but I think it might even be in like the Enterprise Plus license, which is, crazy amount of money. But that's a thing that 2 weeks ago I didn't even know was a problem, and if you run VMware, it is.
You know what I've done just recently too. I'm not a huge VM guy, all right, but I do have Proxmox running in my data centers, and what I did was I didn't use the switch. That's the virtual switch. I use a real switch, but I get it. Then you only have one port going to a switch, so there's a limitation there. So how are you going to mirror ports? Because you're going to get all the traffic from everything. I tried separating them out using VLAN tags, and that kind of helped somewhat. So if I ever, Unfortunately, promiscuous. I've never used promiscuous mode for that purpose because I usually can just capture packets directly from the VM itself. I'm not doing what you're doing, like layer 2 tunnels or where you're going to start seeing all different MAC addresses. So
sure, yeah. And 2 weeks ago, I had neither.
No, okay.
Now I am. But yeah, so just something to keep in mind that your choice of virtualization platform could have an impact on how your virtual infrastructure works.
Let me ask you this: could you do? No, it goes by physical port promiscuous mode, right? It's like a layer 1 thing.
Yeah, like there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to kind of cut up into smaller pieces, but it's not what we're used to, and it sounds like, but it sounds like VMware acknowledges that it's less than useful. Now, VMware does have you can buy a Cisco virtual switch. It's like the Cisco Nexus 1000 or something, and it's just a license and a piece of code that you can stuff into your VMware box, and you basically get a Cisco switch. Your VMware vSwitch is replaced by a virtual Cisco switch
like Cat
that
OS
functions
comes with
just
Cat
like
OS?
a Cisco switch. Yeah. I'm assuming iOS, but I mean, I don't know, or
right.
Nexus OS, or I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't looked into it because I'm like, why am I going to pay for a virtual Cisco something? I don't want to pay for physical Cisco something.
I don't blame you, but they pride themselves on being bug free, whatever. But that's interesting. All right. So the answer to that is if you need that kind of functionality, I guess the only option you have now is the Cisco Virtual Switch.
So you can go Cisco Virtual Switch. There's one other older school option you could do that involved spending more money. But in the latest in the latest vSphere, you can do it on, I think, an Enterprise Plus license, with native vSphere, or you can do Proxmox. I don't know if Hyper-V or any of the other virtualization platforms have a similar problem or not.
Let me ask you: you couldn't just use you couldn't use a MikroTik to do all the tunneling?
Well, I'm doing it on a CHR.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing it on a MikroTik VM.
All right.
In this particular instance, there's facility hardware compliance stuff, so it's easier to get
okay, I got
an
it.
x86 platform
Yeah.
and just run software versus because MikroTik is not going to be certified for use in the facility.
Yeah.
So your hardware limitations.
What if you get you get something like a Cisco box,
Telco stuff.
gut it, and just stick a MikroTik board in there?
Could get like a Cisco chassis and then get some of the blinking panels and just
Yep.
change your
CDP advertising.
Dremel out all the ports and
Yeah,
just
dude. Let's do that.
good work, I suppose.
Let's do that. Screw them. I mean, because really cool.
yeah.
Oh,
But so that kind of segues into the telco environment is why I was looking at this. Now that I said that I can't put MikroTik in some of these places, some of them I am because I needed to. I didn't have time to find a different solution. And quite frankly, if they're going to complain about my Hex S routers sitting in my rack, or my client's rack, I'm going to first point out the buckets of rat poison and propane tanks 6 feet away that probably aren't compliant being in the facility either.
well, they'll kick you out before you snitch on them.
But
Propane
anyway, so
tanks, what the fuck are they doing with propane? I don't even want to know.
it's part central office for telco infrastructure and part storage room for their outside plant stuff.
All right, let's leave them nameless.
But so then I've done so. A telco plant runs on negative 48 volt, which is different than regular 48 volt by 96. So most DC systems you're used to, like your car and whatnot, have 0 volts is like the reference, is the negative, is the ground, so on, and positive 12 volts is what the system runs on.
Yeah.
Telcos run on 0 is the ground reference, whatever, and then negative 48 volts is what the system runs on. They do it, they go the opposite direction because somebody a long time ago figured out that passing negative 48 volts through the cables underground, was better for the cable, less corrosion or animals or something. So now the whole telco world runs on negative 48 volt.
By the way, this is a new topic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so I'm segueing from the, why I'm doing it on a VM.
All right.
Because of telco. Now I'm in the telco world.
Okay.
But I wanted, short term, I needed a MikroTik router to go in these places while I figured out a better long-term solution. And so I got first I got some hex PoEs because hex S's weren't in stock yet, and they rated for beyond 48 volts, and so I just did a simple test. If I plug this in with the with the polarity reversed,
oh boy,
will it work? And yes, the MikroTik powers up and runs fine. If you reverse the polarity. So then my next step is, okay, so this works fine, but now my polarities are opposite, and if I go to plug a Cat5 into my negative 48 volt correctly powered equipment, am I now short-circuiting, power to ground?
I think it has a way of converting everything internally, but go on.
I asked a few places. I finally got some good answers on the AFMUG forum because there's guys there that build circuits for Ethernet stuff. So they know like the back of their hand what all these chips do and how they work.
Mm-hmm.
And the hex PoE, as it turns out, would not work in my case because it does PoE. So there is a electrical connection between the Ethernet pins and the power source.
Yeah, because it
does PoE.
What MikroTik says is it uses it directly from the power source, right?
And so what I basically did was I opened up the router and I just got a multimeter and I just put one probe on the negative. Actually, I did it on the little spot of solder on the back. I didn't try to fit it in the DC jack because then I might touch the positive one more easily. And so I just started probing around with the other side of my multimeter looking for what had continuity to ground. And sure enough, pins on the hex PoE did. But when I figured that out, somebody had, Rocknock had gotten in some of the hex S's that have 3 ports that don't have any PoE at all, not in or out. So I bought some of those because standard Ethernet should be isolated. Sure enough, on those 3 ports, it is isolated from the ground. The other ones were not. The PoE in, PoE out. And so then, with this newfound confidence, I went there. I plugged it into the power. It boots up. I plugged my Ethernet cable in to some much more expensive equipment, and everything worked because of the isolation on the ports 2 through 2, 3, and 4 on the hex S PoE, hex S. So those are running fine in a negative 48 environment right now.
Just curious, you couldn't just get some sort of a inverter?
I could.
Okay. But you wanted to do it the hard way.
Well, I needed it like the next day, and cheap.
Okay.
And Hex S is cheap.
Yeah, well, which MikroTik isn't cheap? I mean, really, their most expensive one is what, like $3,000? Like that's their 48 core monster mammer jammer, but the majority of them are under like a couple $100.
Yeah, and so that actually worked out well. But so you can, so the whole point of this was to note that you can run MikroTik 48 volt routers at negative 48. If you might want to do this, you might want to run negative 48. Email MikroTik anyway and tell them you want them to make their product, support that natively. I'm, going kind of rogue with it. It'll work. But then make sure that you test whichever router you're going to use. Make sure that you use ports that don't have PoE capability for your data connections.
The guys at MikroTik listen to the show, right?
Yeah.
And that they're laughing right now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
I don't even want to imitate what some of them might be saying because I don't speak Latvian. But anyway, I mean, all right, yeah, give it a shot. See what MikroTik says. They're pretty. What would we call it? How do we say this without pissing anyone off? They're very. They stick to what works. Let's say it that way. Okay.
Yeah.
God. Now, next thing on our list, if you're done with that.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
What the hell is vaping? Tell me about that. And we're not talking about vaping like where you smoke like this, hookah-like substance and blow out a freaking cloud of smoke.
No, we have not diversified the podcast that much. We added ham stuff a couple shows ago.
It's related.
We haven't gone that far.
Related. Wisp people need to communicate in the middle of nowhere.
No, I'm not saying it was bad.
Yeah. But vaping is a little out there. But tell me,
just that sort of vaping is not good. Yeah, but So vaping is there was a presentation at the past NANOG by Matt Griswold.
Wait,
he goes by Grizz.
What is NANOG?
NANOG, North American Network Operators Group. 3 times a year they have a conference, and it's the nerdiest network nerds you've ever met. The people that built everything are there.
So no girls, no girls, and no one gets laid.
There are an increasing number of girls there.
Wow.
There's actually even like NANOG Girls Night or something like that, or like women in
what is
tech,
it, like all of 2 girls in the whole place party it up?
Not excluding sales girls and booth babes. There's still a few dozen out of several hundred.
Wow.
I mean it still is predominantly guys.
Yeah.
But there are a fair number of geeky girls. It's like if you've been to a trade show and had terrible internet, you have not been to NANOG. NANOG Seattle. Well, going the opposite way. NANOG Seattle last year, I believe they had 40 gigs of internet for like 800 people.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Like,
was it usable?
You do not have an internet problem when you're at NANOG. There's a tremendous amount of capacity.
All right.
None of this 50 megs or 100 megs for everybody. Each person gets 100 megs.
Well, that's why you need to get into prioritizations. Hello. Something they don't do in America. Nobody in America wants to prioritize. It's so weird. Anyway, go on. Yeah.
But yeah, so this vaping right off the GitHub page, vaping is a healthy alternative to smoke ping. So basically, lots of know smoke ping. It's a network monitoring tool that it primarily does ping. It can do other things, but the way it displays its information is fairly unique. In in showing you. So like what it does is it, in ping, for instance, it'll send. I have mine configured to send 30 pings over 30 seconds because I want that sort of precision. And so then it'll show you what so like on the graph vertically, it'll show you like a solid line like where like your average response time was. And then that bar changes colors based on packet loss. And then...
Now we're talking about ICMP ping, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can do other things. You could do a UDP ping. You could do some other stuff. It is fairly flexible in that regard. But then it will also show you for that sample set the distribution of responses by varying shades of gray above and below the line. So if it does 30 pings in 30 seconds and they're all exactly at 6.0 milliseconds, you'll just have a green line. But if some of them varied up to 3, a couple came in at 1.9, the graph will depict that variation with gray bars.
Just like a stock chart. Shows you're higher, low. Got it. Okay.
And then varying shades of gray depending on how many times it went up that far or down that far. But it's very cumbersome to build. It's in Perl, I think. It's very complicated to set up. I mean, you just follow the instructions on the internet and you'll get it. But there's so many steps. There's so many dependencies and things, and it just gets complicated. And we know the internet guys love to rebuild things they've already built. So vaping is a what did they build this in? I don't even know what language they built it in right now. Python. They built it in Python instead, and to use it. So for Python, there's a kind of a repository of packages that people have contributed called pip, and I'm not sure how you install pip, but I think it comes with most distributions. But now you can install vaping just by pip install vaping. It's installed. It has very similar to smoke ping type configuration, but they're building so many different, it's going to go out of beta, I think August 1st, but it's with much prettier graphs, same style of graphs, just prettier.
Did you say graphs? Because you know where I'm going now.
Everything needs graphs. No,
I'm going to Grafana. See if they have a plugin for smoke ping.
But for vaping, everything is a plugin. So if it's a data storage device, type, database or whatever, there's a plugin. If it's an action you want to do, maybe you're not wanting to test ping, maybe you're wanting to test, HTTP response times to a full query, there's a plugin for that. If you want it to graph one way, there's a plugin for that. So that's how they're building it. And I think Smoke Ping doesn't get enough credit for what it has done. But, now we've got vaping that's, trying to make that a little bit easier.
So in other words, you really like what Smoke Ping does. You just don't like how to set it up and how to integrate it and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's old and complicated.
Okay.
Most of the greatest things on the internet are old and complicated. So if somebody can make something that does something similar, that's not complicated.
Got it.
Then it's more likely to be used. It's less likely to get screwed up.
Got it. Well, that's actually interesting. That's something I've been kind of trying to accomplish. Now I'm talking about Smoke Ping, all right? And I guess Smoke Ping and this vape accomplish the same exact thing, where they're going to send out a certain amount of, or a small bit of packets and test the response time, right? Is that basically what we're talking about here? Okay, yeah. Good. So I've been doing, like, in the VoIP world, that is incredibly important because that's how we find out if a VoIP connection is going to be good to a customer before we actually go and install them. Now, in today's day and age, most connections, I'm going to go so far as to say, like, at this point, 99% of the connections I've come across are sufficient. I mean, VoIP uses very little data, but we're not talking about bandwidth. We're not talking about response time. We're talking about jitter, packet loss, things like that. Because you could have excellent response time and still have some jitter. You could still have packet loss in those scenarios. So in Zabbix, I have a monitor set up for all my customers that constantly ping them every 5 seconds. And with the data that it comes back with, I could tell jitter, packet loss, and response time, obviously, which are the three most important things to VoIP connections because they're real time. There is no retransmission if any data corruption happens. So that's important to me. So Smoke Ping sounds like an awesome thing for me to look at because, again, like I'm using NetXMS and Zabbix in parallel. The one thing I can't get NetXMS to do is exactly what Smoke Ping does. So if anybody out there on YouTube world or in podcast world knows a way to get NetXMS to test jitter, packet loss, I mean, packet loss might be easy, but jitter more specifically, please let me know. Post it in the comments in Slack. But building on that with Vape, I'm curious, where do you use Vape for? Because what is that gonna help you with?
Well, I haven't yet because I just found out about it like 2 days ago.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm not yet sure where I will use it. But because like so I've got NetXMS for my Wisp, just because I want the flexibility. But some other places I use Libre NMS, and Libre NMS has instructions for setting up Smoke Ping to work. And it generates the configs for Smoke Ping and it builds it into the Libre platform. So that's really convenient. Departing from that convenience could be this needs to be really good for it to be worth departing convenience. And and it could be something that you use one system for critical things and then another lesser system that's easier to use for everything.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal world, you want to use one system for everything, but that's not always the option. And funny enough, I was just thinking recently about, we're still, relatively speaking, we're still in the infancy of the internet. Think about it. We haven't even fully migrated over to IPv6. Apps are still going through forks. I mean, they've gotten way better, even up to 5 years ago. Things have gotten so much better, and scary enough, we still have a long way to go. So I'm curious what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now. Is there going to be like, when you want a particular app to do something, is there going to be this one app that does it all for you, for that category at least? Like, is NetXMS going to be the winner? Is Zabbix going to come out with something amazing? Or your NMS thing is are they going to come out with something that's like a one size fits all, has every feature imaginable? So I'm just getting philosophical there, but I was back in the internet on the days when I'd have to dial up to BBSs and trade porn on a dial-up line for like 3-4 hours, and my dad would come yelling at me, "Why are you calling Indiana for like 7 hours?" And I'm like, But it's pretty cool how the internet has evolved. Hopefully, net neutrality won't kill us. Or the repeal of net neutrality won't kill us.
It'll be fine.
Bullshit. It's already been approved in almost every state. Californians, we're fighting it. We're fighting that shit.
I believe that the FCC repeal precluded states from doing it. I know the states are still doing it.
Yeah.
But I think the FCC said, we're not going to do it, and you're not going to do it either. But we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah. There's already a law that the FCC passed years and years and years ago. And it's directly related to what we currently have. I'm surprised it hasn't been more out in the open. So like back in the day, you had 2-3 telephone companies, right? You had MCI, AT&T, and what else? Pac Bell or something. and I don't know what the hell they had in Central America. What'd they have? Not Central, like Middle America. What'd they have back then?
Actually, most of my area would have been independent, but there's like Ameritech and stuff like that.
Okay, but like of the ILEX, let's say MCI, AT&T, and Pac West or Pac Bell. I forget what it was. When you were on, let's say MCI, they wouldn't let you call AT&T, people that are on AT&T. So like that was the early days, and people that are on AT&T couldn't call Pac Bell, people that are on the Pac Bell network. So that's kind of like, think of that in the same terms of the internet. Nowadays, I'm sorry, let me back up a bit. So the FCC came out and said, no, MCI, AT&T, and whoever, you have to allow people on your network to talk to people on an adjacent different network. You have to do that. That is an FCC law. And that same principle is not applying today. And it's just so odd. How come it hasn't? So what do you think?
We could probably go for another hour on this.
Yeah, right. I know. How much time do we have anyway?
Well, we've been doing this for about an hour and a half now.
Oh, Jesus. People are probably flatlining.
I
hope they're in traffic and a very long ride to make it this far.
Well, and I think that probably was a if you didn't notice it was taking a long time, it's because it was engaging, and others will likely think so as well.
Oh.
And if not, I don't care.
If not, play it before you go to sleep if you have trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So this was the Brothers Wisp number 72. I'm just going to plug it again just because I like plugging it in that voice, the game show host voice. Brought to you by Sonar, a scalable, intuitive, and comprehensive ISP billing and operational support system. Learn more at sonar.com. I'm sorry, sonar.software. Oh, I'm such an ass. I just got fired by Sonar. I never even spoke.
I was just gonna ask you, so are you getting paid by Sonar directly to extra spoof the?
I just love sounding like a cheese ball. Tell them what they've won.
Greg, it's the Brothers Wisp. Let's take a ride through space on this mothership. Wireless networking. We talk about equipment and methodology, so sit back and start learning. Lighting up the tower so people can start searching. Shooting up the web in neighborhoods, net surfing. We got horrible jokes, we're loud and annoying, but we're informative facts, we're not disappointing. Just give us a listen, cause fun is the mission. I'm telling you, you don't know what you are missing. Ideas and some good comedy given. If you missed the show already, don't worry, you're forgiven.